It is finally time to get some disc brakes on the 67 Catalina. And this is what we'll be using. This is a disc brake kit made by MP Brakes, and it is specifically for 67 Catalinas. Now, it might fit some other full-size Pontiacs of the same vintage, but well, all I care about is this Catalina. Now, I'm going to show you step-by-step how I do it, and I will be following their directions. Now, they have a couple different options for this kit. There's a link in the description to it, but I went with the drilled and slotted rotors, and I also went with the power booster upgrade for it because I want to switch this to power disc brakes because it's, well, manual drum brakes all the way around. So the power booster was an upgrade, and that does come with a bunch of stuff, including a proportioning valve. But I digress. So what we've got is we've got our drilled and slotted rotors. It should be noted that this disc brake upgrade kit does require you to move up from 14-inch rims to at least 15. I'm going to 18, so they do make one that allows you to use 14-inch if you want to stick with 14-inch rims. We also have brake lines right here. Some of the bracketry you'll need. This is what the calipers are going to end up bolting to. Now, those caliper brackets do have an R and an L stamped on them, so you know which side is which. Here's some of the brake lines. Some of the other bolts you'll need. More brackets. And we've got our bearings. Of course, we've got our calipers that already have brake pads in them. And then our master cylinder and brake booster. And a few more things that go with the brake booster, like the little piece here that goes to the brake pedal. Tools that you're going to need include a standard tool set, and then you might want to have impact and a, well, this electric ratchet, but yeah, air ratchet, electric ratchet. Then either someone to help you bleed brakes, or one of these one-person bleeding bottles. Some additional tools you'll probably need: a nice set of flare nut wrenches, screwdriver, some needle nose, big adjustable wrench, and you know, probably a hammer. And who knows, maybe some more things. Let's start by getting this old drum assembly off. Take out our cotter pin here. The brakes are actually in pretty good shape on this car, except for the master cylinder being shot. But, you know, in today's modern age, a car with manual drum brakes versus any car with power disc brakes, well, one with drum brakes loses. And I don't like losing. There's actually plenty of life left on these brakes. They're practically new. You could use the proper tool to take this apart, or just use a screwdriver like I'm using. Since we're not putting them back on, we don't really care too much about them. All we really need to do is take off this bolt and these two bolts here, and we can get this whole thing off. You don't really need to take all the brakes apart. We may need to work this piece off a little bit, but we're at 3/4 on the back, 5/8 on the front. It's usually pretty tight. I'm just going to go ahead and put the breaker bar on here since the other side needed it. Before we take this off here, we do want to disconnect this brake hose, or cut it, whichever you want to do. Make sure you use a flare nut wrench. If that doesn't work, then I guess there's always vice grips. And get the clip off. Alright. I think you can see part of the problem with the old brakes. There's no fluid in there. Alright, with these two bolts out, let's go ahead and get that all the way out. Now that is connected to your steering arm here, so that's going to be kind of floppy now, but that's okay, because we'll be bolting it all back together very soon. Now, this will come right off. And we can take that off of there. Okay, next up, we want to go ahead and clean this grease off of here and make sure all these surfaces are clean.
Now that our surfaces here and here and here and here are clean, we can now start assembling this.
But first, let me show you something I noticed.
So if you look here, you've got a 3-inch bolt, a 3.5-inch bolt, and then a 2 3/4 inch bolt. What's important to note here is these spacers. And here you can see they assembled all the spacers and all the washers and nuts on our bolts for us. Except that, unfortunately, with mine, and yours may be the same, and this is why I'm showing you this, this is actually supposed to be on the shortest bolt, which is this 2 3/4. So make sure your spacers are on the correct bolts. This little short spacer here, this little short spacer here should be on your longest bolt, and then your second longest bolt. And the big spacer should actually be on your shortest bolt. I'll show you what I mean right now though. Grab these. Grab these. The side with the double hole goes on the side with the actual arm. I'm gonna go ahead and swap these spacers out now. We're using the longest bolt and the second to longest bolt. The short bolt we'll use later. All right, so let me take this off of this one. All right, so we've got bolt, washer, then our spacer, and then it's going to go through Now this is the long bolt, this is the 3.5-inch bolt, and it goes on the side with the arm. So we're going to put our washer back there, and then one of our lock nuts. And the same on the front of this side. Bolt, washer, through there, our spacer, through the hole, through the steering arm, washer, and our lock nut. We can tighten these down now. Next up is our caliper bracket. And we've got our big massive bolt here. It's just going to go right in here. And you guessed it, now we're going to take our 2 3/4 washer, big spacer, through there, washer, and our lock nut. And tighten this up. This is our completed bracket assembly. This is what our caliper is going to mount to. Next up, we're going to install a metal spacer. This is a little tricky. So this is our spacer, and it's got to go on the spindle. Right here you can see it goes all the way on and needs to sit flush. Problem here is this is machined to fit exactly. So we need to put that on there. That's as far as it goes.
So in their directions, they say you can throw this in the oven or you can hammer it on. If you throw it in the oven for like 15 minutes or so, and then it'll be hot enough, you can just slip it on. Or you can hammer it on. I don't think hammering it on is a good idea. But there's a third option, and that's the one I'm going to show you.
All right, so what I'm going to use is the hot rod. It is a electromagnet, magnetic interference tool, and you can get it from Amazon. There'll be a link in the description. But basically, what it's going to do is it's going to heat this up really hot, really quick. I'm going to put those coils over like that, and then press this button, and you see the light comes on. And that metal's actually I'm gonna know it's working because the metal's actually gonna change color a little bit, and it's gonna be real hot. It will burn you, so that's why those needle nose pliers are sitting down there. You can see it's smoking already. I'm just going to let this go for a minute or so. That's probably good. So if you look, we're all the way on.
What was that, maybe 30 seconds to heat that thing up hot enough so that it fit? Works pretty well. Beats using an oven or hammering it on.
Well, that's cooling off. We may as well pack our bearings with the grease. They recommend using Lucas Red and Tacky, and that's what I'm using. Now, you could use a bearing packing tool, or you could just take a bunch of grease in your fingers, which is what I'm going to do, and smash it into the bearings. If you've never done that before, well, I'm sure there's a video on how to do that, but basically you want to make sure you've got grease all over these things and inside the bearing. So you got to put the grease in. Well, maybe you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. We're just going to take the grease, pack it all in the bearing, and just keep putting it in here. And then get some more, put some more in. This works best with a tool, but I know most of you probably don't have a bearing packing tool because, well, people don't pack bearings that much anymore. But just make sure you get grease all over this thing. Spin it a lot, look for any spots that aren't covered in grease, cover them in grease. Alright, that looks good. Pop it in. Wipe your hands off before you touch the camera. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and do this other bearing while I'm here. This is the little bearing that's gonna go on the front. We're not installing it quite yet, but you can go ahead and grease it up. Get a lot of grease in by packing it here in the sides, in the front here. Next, we're going to put our seal in here. It really only fits one way. I suppose you could try and put it in the wrong way, but it won't work very well. So get that in there to where it's kind of snug, and then just tap it down with a hammer. Until it's flush all the way around. Note that I am really not hitting it very hard. I'm using a heavy hammer, so the weight's doing all the work, and I'm not actually smashing the seal. Alright, this is ready to go on. Let me go make sure that it is not too hot. Alright, this is cool to the touch now. We can go ahead and put our rotor on. Rolled and slotted rotors only go on one way, and this is the proper way right here. With this, like this, going so it spins this way. Pull back a little bit so you can see exactly. Here's the front of the car, there's the back of the car. See which way our slots are here. Alright, next comes our little bearing. Then this hardware kit here. You've got a new washer which only fits one way, it is keyed, and a new castle nut. Somewhere there's a new cotter pin too. So the basic idea of this is we're going to tighten it until it's tight, then we're going to back off, and then we're going to tighten it again. Back off again, tighten it a little bit more. And then I'm going to back off just a little bit. And now I should be able to get the cotter pin through. Basically, you tighten as much as you can a couple times, and then you just back off a little bit so you can get the cotter pin through. You don't want to over tighten this. So you don't want to tighten it more to get the cotter pin through. You want to just back off a little bit to get the cotter pin in. Just like that. And then bend that. Bend that down. And then our cap goes on here. You can try and do this so it's not beat up, or you can just, hammer it on like I just did. It's going to be covered up anyways. So before we put the caliper on, I'm going to go ahead and put our brake line on here. Now it just goes up through here. You use your flare nut wrench to tighten this nut down. And then this clip just goes on there. Let me put it on, I'll show you the completed product. All right, here's what our completed line looks like. A couple of things to note. Yes, you tighten it here. Also, the line is loose here, so you have to tighten this. And once you get the caliper connected here to the banjo here, this is also loose. This needs to be tightened as well. So you'll put this on and then tighten this right here. Caliper goes on as you expect, nothing special here. Make sure your bleeder screw is up. If it's not, well, then you've got it on the wrong side. Brake line here. Don't forget this is loose, so you're going to need to tighten this after you put your bolt in here. If you've never done this, well, washer. Put your copper washer on. Go through your other copper washer and then into the back of the caliper. You want to make sure your line is back here and not out here where it can hit the wheel once you put a wheel on here. So we're done here. I'm not going to bore you by showing you the other side being done. We're just going to move to the power brake booster. The other side's done the exact same way this one is. All right, moving on to the master cylinder portion of this job. We got to take this old one off. Now I have already put some WD-40 on these brake lines here and down here at the proportioning valve. So this stuff is ready to come off. But on the back side, up under the dash on the brake pedal, there is a clip that needs to come off. And it is all the way in there. We're just going to pry that back like that. And our clip is out. You kind of lift this edge here and then push it back. Kind of like hanging a photo. Now we can push the pin out. Alright, I just pushed this pin out with a screwdriver. And now you can see our brake pedal is free and we'll be able to take the master cylinder out. Use our flare nut wrench, get these two off. This one's loose, but a spitting is rusted to the line. There, it's freed up now. Alright, lines are off. Now don't lose those nuts like I just did. Alright, we're out. Alright, there's the nut I dropped. And we can go ahead and remove these two here. Let's cut the length. So what I'm going to do is take some measurements off of this one and transfer them over here and then cut it. First thing I'm going to measure is the distance from the old rod here to the face here. So it is about 9.5 centimeters on mine, and yes, you should be taking your own measurements, not using mine. Then what we're going to do, make sure this is straight, and then we're going to go 9.5 centimeters here and mark it. I'm just going to use a piece of tape. And like magic, that tape is at about 9.5 centimeters. So now we're going to cut that. Yeah, let's go ahead and just measure twice, cut once, right? Yep, 9.5, 9.5. Now if you mess this up, I'm sure MP Brakes sells this part. Alright, let's put our nut on here. And we're just going to put that way down there. Okay, now we need to get a measurement from the center of this to our base here. I'm using centimeters because, well, it's just a little easier to use on this thing. Looks like we're at about 11.5, a little touch over. So now we're going to take this. There we are at a touch over 11.5. Now that I have my measurements, I'm going to go ahead and take this one off of here and see whether or not it'll fit on there. Okay, so if you wanted to use the original piece, it does fit, at least on mine it fits. Now before we put our master cylinder and booster on, we do have to figure out the proportioning valve. Probably not going to show you too much of removing this old proportioning valve, because I can either fit wrenches in here or a camera in here, and not really both. But use your flare nut wrenches, get these lines off, get this out of here, and I'll show you what I can. Alright, I've got most of the lines free. This one's free, this one here is free, the one on the back is free. I still need to get the one underneath. There's a bolt down there that you can't really see that's holding this in place, so that's got to come off. I'm going to take that out now. Alright, with that bolt out, I was able to bend the old proportioning valve out of the way a little bit, and I should be able to get to that bottom line now. Here is our new proportioning valve, although technically I guess it's a pressure differential valve and switch. But at any rate, this is your front outlet here, and this one underneath is also a front outlet. And then this is your front inlet, this is your rear inlet, this is your rear outlet. Pretty much just like the one you took off, only a little bit different, little bit different location for the inlets. So at any rate, the original lines do seem to have the right size nuts on them. So I'm going to go ahead and gently bend these lines so that they fit the locations here. Like this one's going to need to be bent back a little bit. The other one's going to need to be bent straight. But I think you get the point. Just be gentle when you're bending those lines so that you don't kink it. So it looks like for the rear brake line going into the proportioning valve, we need this little guy right here. This is a BLF 21B. I had to drop an hour to get this. It was out everywhere else. But this is what it looks like. Oh, I probably should have checked to make sure that it was an open bag. Anyway, hopefully this is the right one. Looks right. The important part here is it's inverted both ends. So 21B. The 21C is not inverted, so that's not what you want. Make sure you get the 21B. I'll put a link in the description. Alright, our proportioning valve is pretty much installed. We've got these two. They're going to go to the master cylinder. There is a little switch down there, a little electrical connector. And the new proportioning valve does come with a new connector for that. So I'm going to cut the old connector off because it will not fit onto that. And put this new one on. Alright, to do this, I'm going to cut the end off, strip it, then I'm going to take our solderless connector, put it over the wire, and then we're just going to put these together like so. I'm going to bring our solderless connector over that connection. We want to get the solder joint over the bare wires. And then we're just going to heat this up with a lighter. Here in the center, this solder should melt. There it goes. Alright, now we got a waterproof connection. It is time to install this. Couple things to note here. We do have to get this onto the brake pedal at the same time we're installing this, so keep that in mind. But you got to go straight back. Don't go at an angle, or that's not going to get on the brake pedal. The other thing to note is, if you look at the old one, this lines up directly with these bolt holes. Now if you look, the bolt holes here are slotted. We're going to want that bottom bolt right against the top of this slot. And the reason I say that is when we straighten this rod out, it lines up with the top of the slot. So that's where we want it, so that it lines up just like this one. All right, making sure that that goes in properly. I'm just going to put one of the nuts on here. All right, looks like we got a slight problem. Yep. Yeah, we do. If we look down in here, there's a couple bolts down there, and they are making it so this will not seat all the way. All right, coming back off. Apparently my camera turned off while I was putting that on there, but we're back on. And what I did was I cut a notch here. I just notched this out on this bracket, so now that nut and bolt fits, and you can see we're flush. So we're good. Okay, well, I've got just one nut on there. I'm going to go underneath the dash and see if we can get that brake pedal hooked up. And once that's hooked up, then we'll go ahead and put the other 3 nuts on. So whether you're using the original pin or the one that came with the kit, you're probably going to want to use a magnet to go over the steering column, through the hole, then through the bracket and brake pedal to get this in. Good luck. All 4 bolts are tightened down. Our pin is installed in the brake pedal. Now, I bent these lines so that they would fit. So I'm just going to tighten these up. I know I'm not using a flare nut wrench right now, but when I actually tighten them, I will be using a flare nut wrench. You know, you might want to bench bleed this. The directions come with it. We do need to do this vacuum hose, and the kit does come with a 11/32 vacuum hose, which hopefully will reach over to my carburetor. Now mine, it's on the back of the carburetor. Your carburetor might be different, so you should look that up based on your carb. Okay, so speaking of these lines, don't forget this master cylinder actually has provisions on both sides. So whichever side you didn't use, make sure you put these in the other. When bleeding your brakes and topping off the master cylinder here, they do say to use .4 brake fluid. They even have a brand name, which I forget that they want you to use. But this Prestone, so it should be fine. It's .4. You can use .3 in this system as well, but they recommend .4, so that's what I'm using. Okay, so if you're doing this job, I'm assuming you already know how to bleed brakes. I'm not really going to show you how to do that. I've already bled 3 of the 4, so we're at the final one. As a refresher, you start all the way at the back passenger side, then back driver side, front passenger side, and then front driver side. That's where we're at. Since I'm a one-man show most of the time, I actually use this little bleeder bottle. I do prefer the 2-man method, but if you don't have 2 people, you can use this guy. So with this, you just open up your bleeder, and then take your hose, put it on top of the bleeder, get that on there like that, and then pump your brakes. Basically, this is a one-way valve here, so air can go out as the fluid comes in, but the air won't come back in because it's a one-way valve. So I'm just going to pump the brakes and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so we should be good after I tighten that bleeder back down. And that's it for this video. I know you probably wanted a test drive, but I still gotta buy some new tires for this thing. So like, subscribe, and comment. There will be a follow-up video. I'll see you all down the road.